Ty, dawaj to. Ale materiał. Dzikie 6 lat developmentu Clair Obscur. Jaka różnica w modelach. Przecież to jak model stary z PS2 wyjęty.
This is Clair Obscur Expedition 33, just 1 year into development. This footage you're seeing was made with the sole purpose of
Co
trying
ty
to find
gadasz?
voice actors for the main characters. In fact, the creator of the game would literally be posting this to
Co? Oni zrobili taką demówkę, wersję dla aktorów głosowych, żeby...
Seeing Expedition 33, just 1 year into development. This footage you're seeing was made with the sole purpose of trying to find voice actors for the main characters.
Aha, żeby znaleźć. Ty, ale w ogóle jakiś zajebisty koncept, że oni stworzyli grę, która była totalnie nieoszlifowana, ale najwyraźniej była już tak jakby w pełni grywalna i ciekawy jestem, jak duży wycinek był już wtedy zrobiony i potem to cały czas dopalali i to... Nie no, ciekawy jestem, bo to aż dziwne by było. Ale wyobrażacie sobie sytuację, jak oni by na przykład zrobili bardzo dużą część gry na zasadzie prototypu właśnie takiego, a dopiero potem by każdy element dorzucali w o wiele lepszej formie i go doszlifowywali? Nie no, nie wierzę, że cała gra już była wtedy gotowa. Znaczy na pewno nie była, ale ciekawy jestem, jak duży jej procent.
The creator of the game would literally be posting this to Reddit in order to find voice actors for their characters. And from that same Reddit post, the creator would also find a lead writer, of which also had no experience in working in games before. In fact, her previous role was an investor at a private equity company. To top it off, the composer for the game's soundtrack had never written a game soundtrack before, and he was brought on after the director of...
No i nagle się okazuje, że obecne narzędzia do tworzenia gier komputerowych i umiejętności adaptacyjne ludzi, oczywiście mądrych ludzi, są na tyle wysokie, że nie potrzebujesz mieć 20 lat doświadczenia w tworzeniu gier komputerowych. Jesteś w stanie nauczyć się tego w kilka lat, pracując już na jakimś projekcie, nie?
The game found him off of SoundCloud. And to put this into perspective, most AAA games like Fortnite or Call of Duty are backed by hundreds of developers across dozens of different departments. So this begs the question, how did a team that's smaller than the Call of Duty microtransaction department craft the most visually incredible and most impactful RPG?
Jak to wyglądało, ale Nie no, koncept tej gry początkowy fenomenalnie wygląda. Jak jeszcze wiesz, jak to wyglądało potem dalej. Nie no, Clair Obscur to jest taka gra, którą my musieliśmy dostać. Clair Obscur to jest ta gra, która wszystkie argumenty wytrąca ludziom z ręki broniącym AAA i broniącym ogromnych korporacji. To jest gra, która jest finalnym kontrargumentem, gdzie ktoś coś mówi, może powiedzieć, dobra, zamknij mordę i zagraj sobie w Clair Obscura, nie? Ciekawe, czy będzie tak samo jak z Baldur's Gate'em, że będzie, nie możecie patrzeć na tą grę, bo ta gra jest, jakie to słowo padało przy Baldur's Gate'cie? Że jest anomalią, no nie? I tam mówili, że Baldur's Gate jest anomalią, bo deweloper sam sobie tworzył warunki, na których tworzył tę grę i że inne firmy nie mogą tego robić. A Clair Obscur samo sobie też zrobiło te warunki, tworząc sobie nową firmę złożoną z 33 osób, nie? Sorry, z 32, bo 33 to pies podobno. Co 2 lata nowa anomalia się pojawia, no.
Expedition 33's journey began in late 2020, but the first concepts actually started 4 years before that. Guillaume Broche, who was the founder of Sandbox Interactive and the director of Expedition 33, was at Ubisoft for roughly 4 years. From 2016 up until 2019, he would work on games like The Division 2 and Ghost Recon Breakpoint. After those 2 games shipped, he was put in a narrative lead role for...
Ej, ale mnie strasznie to kurwa dziwi w tych dużych korporacjach, bo to nieraz się zdarza właśnie tak samo, że typ, co pracuje stary nad FPS-em, nagle staje się kurwa lead writerem do jakiejś gry fantasy, nie? Ja nie jestem w stanie tego strzelić. To jest tak jak do Diablo 4 wzięli Roda Fergusona, który się kurwa Gears of War'em zajmował. No ja pierdolę, stary, no okej, ja gram dużo w gry, gram głównie kurwa w RPG, ale no nie wyobrażam sobie, że nagle miałbym na przykład, nie wiem, pracować kreatywnie przy kurwa FPS-ie. Czy to jest tak pojebane? No ja nie wierzę, że kurwa masz tak szerokie spektrum rozumienia gier komputerowych. To jest niemożliwe. No to jest kurwa hobby jak każde inne, gdzie też jesteś ukierunkowany na konkretne gatunki, nie?
Game franchise called Might and Magic. And like many of you right now, I had no idea this game franchise even existed. But apparently, the franchise is a mobile game owned by Ubisoft Shanghai, and Brosh was leading the narrative for this franchise. And as you would expect from leading the narrative on a mobile game designed to extract as much money as possible from players, Guillaume got bored with the work that he was doing on the team, and really felt like there was no impact to what he was doing. And during this time, he had ambitions that went beyond being shoehorned into a mobile gacha game. He knew that a game like Expedition 33 would never be greenlit by Ubisoft, so he quit his job in order to pursue his ambition. Alongside him, Tom Guillerme had the same ambitions as the director, so he would also...
Wiecie, co jest najciekawsze? Że na przykład ta historia może zainspirować dużo innych ludzi siedzących w tej branży do faktycznie zrobienia kolejnego swojego projektu. Prawda jest taka, że historię piszą zwycięzcy i 99%, które się w tym momencie zwolni z game devu i założy własne studio, zacznie robić własne gry, to zderzy się ze ścianą i okaże się, że byli jebanymi pionkami i chuja się zdają na grach i nic ciekawego nie zrobią. Ale może zainspiruje to kogoś, to faktycznie skończy z zajebistą grą.
leave Ubisoft and join the infant team, with the director writing up the narrative and Tom, who had expertise on how Unreal Engine worked. The small grassroots team would begin by exploring Unreal Engine 4. While the director was messing around with Unreal Engine, the original prototype for Clair Obscur was supposed to be related to time. So when he had to save the project on his computer, he had to find a name for the project file. So what would the project be called? Well, the game's related to time, so maybe Hourglass. Well, Sandfall in an hourglass. Okay, Sandfall is the working name of the game, and from that point on, the game's internal working name would be Sandfall, even to this date. With Tom at the helm as co-founder and CTO, and Guillaume as CEO and also a co-founder, they would embark on their expedition to create a brand new world by themselves. Now that the studio had been founded, it was time to actually build up the game. Since Guillaume wanted this game to have a big focus on narrative, he began reaching out anywhere he could to find people who would be interested in helping the passion project evolve into something a bit more serious.
No, powiem wam tak, to piorunująco nie wygląda, nie? Co tu jest pokazane, ale już widać ten główny zalążek, jak oni bardzo chcieli grać tymi planami, nie? Tą głębią.
Created this post on the subreddit r/record this for free, looking to cast actors for the main roles of the game, including, of course, Mayel. One of the many people who auditioned from this Reddit post was Jennifer Schvedberg-Yen. She got one of the leading roles as an actor. However, once she joined the team, it was pretty clear that her impact would be most noticed in a writer position, so she became lead writer on the game. Despite the growing teams, the co-founders and Jennifer Yen said that they wore many different hats during the game's production. Her involvement would span from story to gameplay to art and all over the project. At this point, the small team continued prototyping and development on the game, but the team started the hunt for a composer at the same time. The co-founders began their hunt for a composer by reaching out to the most popular composers in the industry, like Hans Zimmer, Johnny Paisano, Danny Elfman, and... just kidding. He began his search on SoundCloud. That's where he found Lorien Testart. And at this point, Lorien had never worked on a game before, but caught the attention of the co-founders based off the work he's done on his SoundCloud. I am not making this up. The composer of Expedition 33, one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard in a video game, had never worked on a video game soundtrack before. Oh, and actually, it wasn't SoundCloud. It was even crazier than that. One night, the director went on an obscure gaming forum with like 10 people on it, and he made a post asking if anybody would want to join his team as a composer. And out of sheer luck, Lorian Testard had also randomly found this forum for the first time, just an hour after the post was made. The hunt to expand the team wouldn't end just there. They would
Ja
also
pierdolę, ty. Czy jeżeli na przykład ty by napisał ten post 2 godziny później, to możliwe, żeby się nigdy nie znaleźli? Czy to jest taka kurwa
find the
historia?
studio's art director too. Nicholas Maxon Francombe would join the studio during the founders' hunt through online forums. The core development team of 6 developers would continue to work on the prototype for Expedition 33. Driven by a cohesive vision of what they wanted the game to be from the very beginning, the teams spent the majority of 2020 building out the studio first, and then towards the end of the year, the game itself. Everyone was on the same page here and had the same goals as each other: to make one of the best reimaginings of a classic JRPG that anybody will ever play.
No, ambitnie. A się chyba kurwa udało.
By April 2021, Sandfall moved into a bigger office, and the core development team working on Expedition 33 started to expand. The team went from 6 employees to now more than 15 working on the game, comprising mostly of junior-level engineers who didn't really have any experience in making games before, but were just as ambitious as the rest of the studio. The once grassroots passion project was starting to evolve into something bigger. By mid-2021, they were putting the finishing touches on a newer, rebooted demo, something small, but was polished enough to attract attention. The original version of Expedition 33 was more Victorian, but these were all assets comprised of the Unreal Engine asset store, just as a quick way to rapidly create a simple prototype. But as the studio's new art director joined, they shifted directions a bit. The demo was meant to serve as a teaser for potential investors or as a foundation for a future Kickstarter campaign. In less than a year since forming the studio, the team began presenting their work to various publishers. Though still in a prototype phase, the demo was impressive, especially given the team's limited size and resources. Towards the end of 2021, they would meet with a brand new publisher, Kepler Interactive. And for those who don't know Kepler Interactive, they are a small indie publisher founded in September of 2021. Kepler Interactive is co-owned by a group of independent game developers, and their primary initiative is to help fund smaller indie games like Sifu, for example, and allow teams to have full creative freedom over their projects. Right off the bat, the publisher and the development teams hit it off and quickly inked a deal to work together in order to ship Expedition 33. Sandfall would use the extra funding rounds by Kepler to shift development from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5. Additionally, Kepler would also open the door for more popular voice actors to be brought onto the project. And of course, the small team of 12 people would grow to 22 people working on Expedition 33. Kepler Interactive and Sandfall would announce their partnership together in March of 2023. Additionally, around the same time, Microsoft would also pick up Expedition 33 as a day one Game Pass launch title.
Ciekawe, ile
At this
Microsoft
point, the game
zapłacił.
had financial backing, guaranteed exposure through Game Pass, successfully switched over to Unreal Engine 5, and greatly expanded their tiny development team, all within a year or two, while also simultaneously working on the actual game. With their new investments coming in, they were also able to upgrade their office with a full motion capture studio. And Kepler Interactive helped pull in a star-studded cast to help voice the main characters. The cast that Kepler was able to pull in is a bit wild. Gustav was played by none other than Charlie Cox, who you may know as Daredevil. Jennifer English played Mayel, who was Shadowheart from Baldur's Gate 3. Ben Starr played Verso, and he was also in Final Fantasy XVI. Andy Serkis from, well, you know who he is, and the list just goes on with even more incredible talent. The game was becoming something much bigger than just a great game with excellent gameplay. It was also shaping up to become an incredible narrative experience that arguably could be up there with the best movies of all time. As a side note on the movie side,
Zwróćcie uwagę, że To nie jest tak, że ci aktorzy tutaj dostali po prostu tekst z kartki do przeczytania i dlatego tak dobre jest gra aktorska faktycznie w Clair Obscurze, bo oni już czytają to faktycznie widząc konkretną scenę. Mają ładnie pokazany cały timeline wypowiedzi i są z reżyserem i innymi aktorami prowadzącymi ten dialog. Dlatego to wypadło tak fenomenalnie. Bo bardzo często, no niestety w grach teraz popularniejsze jest to, że aktor głosowy dostaje kwestię dialogową do przeczytania, czyta to z kartki i kończy się potem tak jak w Oblivionie, no nie? Że w jednym dialogu są dwie zupełnie inne ekspresje, bo było to inaczej rozpisane na kartce, a tutaj faktycznie jest to w pełni wyreżyserowane, nie?
Kepler Interactive was also able to secure a live-action film for the franchise too. It's too early to say how good that will be, but it is a fun fact. By the end of 2023, Sandfall Interactive would begin working on a debut trailer for Expedition 33. Since they had a partnership with Microsoft and were going to ship the game day one on Game Pass, they also had a spot in the Xbox Game Showcase in 2024. This is where they chose to reveal their passion project turned masterpiece to the world.
Jest i Clair Obscur. W takiej formie, jak my go znamy.
Sandfall Interactive would reveal the game to the world in June of 2024. And right off the bat, everybody was enthralled by the world that Sandfall had introduced us to. Typically, when a game spends 6 years in development, we would consider it to be stuck in development hell, or a case of too many cooks in the kitchen. However, with Sandfall Interactive and Expedition 33, a 6-year development cycle is actually a pretty remarkable turnaround. I know it sounds a bit crazy to say, but just looking at all of the accomplishments the studio made within the development cycle really helps highlight this point. The first 2 years involved just a couple of folks playing around in Unreal Engine to get a better feel of how the engine worked and creating a rapid prototype of Expedition 33. One that was a bit more Victorian and had utilized free assets from the Unreal marketplace. The next 2 years were spent growing the team, with more talent, bringing in specialized directors, and starting the process of securing a publishing deal that would help bring the game into the limelight. And the final 2 years were spent iterating upon their prototypes and creating a game with a laser-focused vision, a vision that the entire team shared unilaterally. Not only...
Właśnie, kurwa, to też jest chyba, mi się wydaje, bardzo istotny aspekt. To było małe studio, przez co oni naprawdę mieli, kurwa, wspólną wizję. No jak możesz doprowadzić do sytuacji, w której w jednej firmie masz 500 osób i wszyscy będą mieli wspólną wizję? No to jest niemożliwe. Tego się, kurwa, nie da po prostu zrobić. I dlatego często te gry dają takie wrażenie, jakby były, kurwa, wycinanką z innych różnych projektów. A jeżeli pracujesz na faktycznie małym projekcie, przy którym jest 30 stare osób, no to bez żadnego problemu jesteś w stanie tak sobie dobrać team, że każdy się ze sobą będzie w stanie porozumieć.
Was the team being built up during their 6-year development? But even their publisher was too. The CEO of Sandfall really hit it out of the park when he said something along the lines of, "You can accomplish so much when working with a smaller publisher team." Kepler and Sandfall both had double-digit employees, so the CEOs found it really easy to interface with each other. Alongside the fact that the studio had full creative control, the relationship between the two companies was solely dedicated to crafting the best game they possibly could, with no middlemen trying to squeeze money out of the players. Just 2 months later, the team would put out a 6-minute gameplay reveal. This reveal would showcase all of the work that they had done thus far during development. At this point, the gameplay they showed off looked to be almost identical to the final version we would get a couple months later.
Kurwa, fragment gry już był full zrobiony.
At this point was bug fixing and minor UI changes. By the end of 2024, the team had finally finished the core development of the game, and it was time to celebrate. They knew that the game would be releasing next year, and they anxiously waited fans to get their hands on their project. And to no surprise to anybody who's played Expedition 33, they absolutely crushed it. Not only was it a critical success with reviewers, but also gamers. Since release, the game has been in the top 10 most popular games on Steam alone. In just 12 days, The game sold over 2 million copies, and we can only imagine what the actual player count is if you factor in Game Pass. The story of this game's development is just crazy. The teams absolutely deserved their flowers in creating such a great journey with such a small team. But don't just take it from me. Here's the founder of Larian Studios, the developers of Baldur's Gate 3, predicting the success of Clair Obscur Expedition 33.
So it turns out that not only will I be the one who will know as first which game wins tonight, but I actually also know which game is going to win next year, the year after, and...
Jezu, ta przemiana była tak niesamowita. On zjebał całą kurwa branżę, ona mu jeszcze klaskała, nie?
The year after. Now, how do I know this? Well, an oracle told me. She said, change is coming. The oracle told me that the game of the year 2025 was going to be made by a studio who found the formula to make it up here on stage. It's stupidly simple, but somehow it keeps on getting lost. Studio made their game because they wanted to make a game that they wanted to play themselves. They created it because it hadn't been created before. They didn't make it to increase market share. They didn't make it to serve as a brand. They didn't have to meet arbitrary sales targets or fear being laid off if they didn't meet those targets. And furthermore, the people in charge forbade them from cramming the game with anything whose only purpose was to increase revenue and didn't serve the game design. They knew that if you put the game and the team first, the revenue will follow. They were driven by idealism and wanted players to have fun. And they realized that if the developers didn't have fun, nobody was going to have any fun. They understood the value of respect, that if they treated their developers and players well, those same developers and players would forgive them when things didn't go as planned. But above all, they cared about their game because they loved games. It's really that simple, said the oracle.
Siarek, chuj, nie?
C'est vraiment une expérience qui a été très importante pour moi. J'ai pleuré pendant 2 jours, j'ai rigolé, c'était formidable.
Ale zajebiste wideo. Ork czuć. Bez kitu. Ork czuć.